You've seen the memes. You've scrolled past iceberg charts online, each layer diving deeper into the strange and the obscure. Tarot at the top, demons near the middle, and at the bottom, symbols no one can name. Concepts so cryptic they're barely discussed even in occult circles. But what if the iceberg isn't just a fun internet format? What if it's a map? A coded diagram of knowledge lost, forbidden, or hidden for centuries? What if the deeper you descend, the closer you come not just to truth, but to the very foundations of reality as we know it? We've been told that mysticism and magic are fringe beliefs, remnants of a primitive past. But beneath the surface of entertainment and pop culture spirituality lies a system older than empires, buried beneath layers of fear, distortion, and control. At the tip of this iceberg are the symbols everyone knows: astrology, tarot, meditation. But as we go deeper, we find traces of ancient initiatory rites, mind-altering rituals, interdimensional structures, and at the bottom, a name few dare speak. Aloud, the Demiurge. This is not conspiracy. This is metaphysical archaeology. This is the unraveling of a reality constructed by unseen hands. The iceberg is not merely a representation of knowledge, it's a psychological and spiritual descent. Each level is a veil removed. Each concept, when truly understood, alters how you perceive everything: time, thought, spirit, even your own self. And once you've seen below the surface, you can never go back. The world doesn't change, but your ability to see it does. Tonight, we're not just going to explore the occult iceberg, we're going to decode it. And by the end, you might discover that what's hidden beneath isn't darkness, but the light that was never meant to be found. The concept of the occult iceberg serves as a metaphorical structure to represent layers of esoteric knowledge, belief systems, and spiritual paradigms that range from widely accepted practices to the most hidden and controversial ideas known only to a few. Like the tip of a physical iceberg, the surface of occult knowledge is what most people see: safe, symbolic, and often sanitized. But the deeper one descends below the surface, the more obscure, complex, and destabilizing the information becomes. The iceberg is not simply a model of information hierarchy. It is a descent into awareness itself, an allegorical journey from the superficial into the profound, from the collective conscious into the depths of the occult subconscious. At the surface level, the top layer of the iceberg is composed of concepts that have been integrated into mainstream society, often stripped of their original depth and transformed into consumer products or casual aesthetics. This includes pop astrology, personality-driven tarot readings, surface-level crystal healing, and vague affirmations drawn from New Age ideologies. These practices are widely shared, commercialized, and often divorced from the ritual, discipline, and metaphysical context that originally empowered them. They are safe, easily digestible, and accessible to the general public precisely because they no longer challenge the foundations of societal belief or individual identity. They are the shadows of older practices made palatable. Just beneath this top layer exists a zone of more committed spiritual practices that require a certain level of study and experience. Here one finds deeper tarot systems aligned with the Kabbalistic tree of life, Hermetic philosophy, energy work grounded in Eastern and Western alchemical systems, and the preliminary structures of ceremonial magic. Concepts such as the law of correspondence, the four elements, planetary magic, and archetypal symbolism become tools for internal transformation rather than superficial guidance. This level often introduces initiatory concepts, symbolic death and rebirth motifs, and the importance of will, intention, and ritual in shaping reality. The seeker begins to understand that occult knowledge is not entertainment, but a path of inner evolution that demands commitment and consequence. Descending further, one encounters paradigms that question the very fabric of reality. Theories of egregores, collective psychic entities generated by thought and emotion, are revealed not as fantasy but as real metaphysical structures capable of influencing consciousness and events. Systems of thought such as Theosophy, Rosicrucianism, and Gnostic Christianity present alternative cosmologies in which the visible world is a projection, a distortion, or even a prison. The practitioner here is confronted with the possibility that what we call real may be illusory, that the forces shaping human history, identity, and belief are not merely political or cultural, but metaphysical and intentional. These are not idle thoughts. They are gateways to an understanding that destabilizes consensus reality and begins to rewire perception itself. At these mid-levels, knowledge becomes less linear and more initiatic. Language fails to fully capture what is experienced. Symbols become active, speaking across time and space to initiate transformations in consciousness. The archetypes of Jung are no longer theoretical. They are experienced as real, living forces. Rituals, dreams, synchronicities, and meditations begin to bleed into waking life. The seeker is no longer learning about occultism. They are inside it. They are becoming transformed by it. The iceberg becomes less an intellectual model and more a spiritual terrain through which the soul descends in search of truth. Further below, the knowledge becomes increasingly controversial, forbidden, or outright heretical. Here are the dark mirrors of religion, magic, and metaphysics, concepts that question not just society, but the very nature of divinity. Discussions arise about the Demiurge, the creator of the material world in Gnostic tradition, portrayed not as a loving god, but as a blind jailer, a being who mistakes itself for the source of all. Systems such as Sethian Gnosticism, left-hand path traditions, and radical Hermeticism view human consciousness as trapped, manipulated, or engineered for purposes beyond its awareness. This layer suggests that enlightenment is not union with God, but liberation from a false creator and his binding illusion. It posits that the true divine spark lies not in heaven or doctrine, but hidden inside, awaiting ignition through will, gnosis, and transformation. These deeper layers are filled with warnings. Not all who descend return unchanged. The knowledge at these levels dismantles psychological, emotional, and spiritual structures that took a lifetime to build. Identity dissolves. The self becomes fluid, and morality becomes relative. The seeker must rely on their inner compass, as few maps exist to guide this terrain. The further one travels, the more solitary the journey becomes. Communities thin. Teachers vanish. The seeker must face the abyss of meaning and find within it their own flame. At the base of the iceberg, the model collapses. Language, belief, and duality break down. Concepts like good and evil, light and dark become tools, useful in context, but ultimately transcended. The final descent is not about knowledge, but about transformation. It is a metaphysical death, the crucifixion of the false self and the birth of a being no longer bound by illusion. The individual is not destroyed, but remade, not into something new, but into what they always were, beneath the layers of conditioning, trauma, doctrine, and sleep. This is the realm where myths live, where gods are archetypes and archetypes are tools, and where the greatest truths are both terrifying and liberating. The occult iceberg, then, is more than a diagram. It is a living initiatory map, describing a process, not a structure. It represents the soul's descent from ignorance into gnosis, from false light into true darkness, and from that darkness into self-forged divinity. Each layer is a veil, a test, a reflection of where the practitioner stands in their own becoming. It is not necessary to descend. Many remain above and live content. But for those who hear the call, who feel the itch behind the veil of appearances, the iceberg is a silent invitation. Descend if you dare. But know that what you find below may change everything you believe, everything you are, and everything you were ever told was real. Tarot is often misunderstood, relegated in the popular imagination to a tool for fortune-telling or party tricks. But at its heart, it is one of the most profound symbolic systems ever created. A language designed not just for divination, but for spiritual navigation, inner alchemy, and the mapping of consciousness itself. To approach tarot merely as a method for predicting future events is to reduce it to a shadow of its true potential. In the context of the occult iceberg, tarot stands at an intermediate level, accessible enough to be recognized by the mainstream, but encoded deeply enough to guide those who can perceive beyond the superficial into realms of profound transformation. The tarot deck is composed of 78 cards, divided into two principal sections, the major arcana and the minor arcana. The major arcana consists of 22 cards, each depicting a distinct archetypal figure or situation: the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, and so on. While the minor arcana, much like a deck of playing cards, is divided into 4 suits, traditionally known as cups, pentacles, swords, and wands. These minor arcana cards reflect everyday human experiences and challenges, whereas the major arcana outlines the greater universal journey of the soul. The major arcana is often interpreted as representing the stages of spiritual evolution, a path often called the Fool's Journey. The Fool begins his journey in a state of innocent openness, unaware of the complexities of the world and of the self. Each subsequent card represents a stage of growth, confrontation, mastery, or revelation. The magician introduces the use of will and intention. The high priestess beckons the fool inward, toward intuitive knowing. The empress and emperor represent the engagement with external structures of nurturing and authority. This journey continues through trials, temptations, and transformations until reaching the world, symbolizing completion, integration, and the rebirth of the individual into a higher state of consciousness. Each card in the tarot is a multidimensional symbol, layered with meanings derived from astrology, numerology, Hermeticism, alchemy, Kabbalah, and mythology. The images on the cards are not random or merely artistic. They are glyphs that, when meditated upon or engaged with ritually, activate subconscious and superconscious energies within the practitioner. They are mirrors that reflect both the surface of the psyche and the deep, often hidden currents flowing beneath. The suits of the minor arcana correspond to the four elements: cups to water, emotion and intuition; pentacles to earth, material reality and manifestation; swords to air, thought and conflict; and wands to fire, will and creativity. These elemental correspondences provide a framework for understanding the fundamental energies at work in any given situation, within oneself, and within the external world. Beyond this, the numbers associated with each card carry vibrational significances, mirroring the process of evolution from the ace, pure potential, through to the 10, completion and preparation for a new cycle. Deeper still is the connection between the tarot and the Kabbalistic tree of life. In esoteric traditions, each major arcana card is linked to a path between two sephiroth, spheres, on the tree of life, which itself is a diagram of the soul's structure and its relation to the divine. Thus, engaging with tarot is not simply drawing cards at random, but stepping consciously onto an initiatory path that mirrors the ascent, or descent, of consciousness through multiple dimensions of existence. The High Priestess, for instance, is associated with the path between Kether, the crown, and Tifereth, the heart, bridging the infinite divine potential with the fully realized self. In advanced occult practice, the tarot is used not merely for insight, but for direct transformation. Rituals involving pathworking allow the practitioner to enter into the living landscape of the tarot, experiencing the cards as realms of consciousness. The magician is not just an image to interpret, but a state of being to embody. The tower is not merely a warning of disaster, but a necessary purgation that destroys false structures to make way for truth. By traversing these landscapes, the practitioner undergoes real psychological, emotional, and spiritual changes, burning away illusions and refining the soul. Moreover, each tarot card resonates with a vibrational energy that can be summoned, invoked, or channeled. In the work of ceremonial magic, specific cards may be meditated upon to attune oneself to a particular frequency of understanding or power. For instance, the hermit may be invoked to cultivate inner wisdom and detachment from external distractions, while the star may be called upon to renew hope and alignment with divine purpose. Thus, tarot becomes both a diagnostic and a prescriptive tool in the alchemical transformation of the self. Even in casual readings, when approached with seriousness and reverence, the tarot reveals more than just hints about future events. It reflects the deeper pattern at play within the querent's life. It exposes the energetic dynamics that are unfolding, the hidden motivations, the karmic lessons that are presenting themselves. It shows not a fixed destiny, but a living map of possibility, a way to navigate with greater awareness and mastery. The symbolic depth of tarot also allows it to act as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. When engaging with the cards, one opens a dialogue with the deeper strata of the psyche, inviting images and patterns to emerge that the rational mind might otherwise suppress. The visual and symbolic language of the cards bypasses the critical faculties and speaks directly to the intuitive and creative centers of the mind. In this sense, tarot is not simply about knowledge. It is about awakening the faculties necessary to perceive truth beyond the confines of ordinary cognition. Furthermore, in the deeper layers of the occult iceberg, tarot is seen as a fractal key to the structure of reality itself. Each card represents not just psychological states, but cosmic principles. The Emperor is the organizing principle of form. The moon is the realm of dreams, illusions, and the astral. Judgment is the call to transcend duality and prepare for higher rebirth. In this way, the tarot deck becomes a microcosm of the macrocosm, a portable symbolic universe that, when properly understood and engaged with, can unlock profound insights into the nature of being. In the modern age, where symbols are often emptied of their sacred charge through commercialization and superficial engagement, the tarot still retains its potency for those who approach it with the requisite depth and seriousness. It remains a living, breathing system, one that evolves with each seeker who dares to truly enter its mystery. It is not a book to be read, but a world to be entered, a mirror that not only reflects but transforms. Thus, tarot is far more than cards. It is a sacred technology, a coded language left behind by those who understood the power of symbols to shape consciousness and, through consciousness, reality itself. To truly work with tarot is to step onto a path of gnosis, to engage with the deep currents of the soul, and to begin the long, luminous descent into the hidden depths of the occult iceberg. Egregores, archetypes, and shadows form the next layer of the occult iceberg, deepening the understanding of how invisible forces influence the human psyche and the external world. These are not abstract philosophical ideas but living dynamics, shaping reality from behind the veil of ordinary perception. To grasp these forces is to move beyond simple symbol reading into the realm where thought forms gain autonomy, where the human mind interacts with collective energies, and where hidden parts of the self can either sabotage or liberate one's existence. Engaging with these forces demands a level of psychological maturity and spiritual discernment that few are willing to cultivate. But for those who do, a deeper mastery of life becomes possible. An egregore is a psychic entity formed when a group of individuals invests collective emotional and mental energy into a shared idea, symbol, or goal. Over time, this accumulation of focused attention generates a metaphysical being that exists independently of its creators to varying degrees. Egregores can be simple, such as the spirit of a corporation, or immensely complex, such as national identities, religions, or even entire paradigms of thought. They are fueled by belief, ritual, and emotional engagement. As long as people continue to feed them energy, egregores persist and exert influence over thoughts, behaviors, and events. They can offer a sense of belonging, motivation, and power, but they can also enslave, consuming individual will in favor of the collective. Understanding egregores is essential for anyone who wishes to move beyond unconscious participation in mass consciousness. Without awareness, a person becomes a pawn of various egregores, channeling energy into their maintenance without ever questioning whether these forces serve their true will. To free oneself is not necessarily to destroy egregores, which can be virtually impossible on a large scale, but to recognize their influence and choose consciously how, when, and whether to engage with them. In magical practice, it is possible to create personal egregores, thought forms or servitors, designed to assist in specific tasks or goals. These must be maintained carefully and dissolved when their purpose is complete, lest they develop unintended autonomy. Archetypes, distinct yet related, operate on a more universal scale. They are the primordial patterns embedded deep within the collective unconscious, influencing human behavior, emotion, and thought across cultures and eras. Archetypes such as the hero, the mother, the trickster, the shadow, and the sage recur in myths, stories, and dreams not by accident, but because they are fundamental structures of human consciousness itself. Carl Jung's work brought these concepts into broader psychological discourse, but mystics and occultists have long understood their potency. When interacting with archetypes, the magician does not merely analyze them intellectually, but engages with them experientially. Archetypes can be invoked, embodied, and integrated into personal development. For instance, consciously working with the warrior archetype can cultivate courage, discipline, and assertiveness. However, engaging with archetypes is a double-edged sword. They are powerful precisely because they are so deeply rooted. An archetype can dominate the ego if approached unconsciously, leading to possession-like states where one behaves not from individual choice, but from the overwhelming influence of a mythic pattern. Thus, the work with archetypes must be balanced, approached with reverence and vigilant self-awareness. Beyond both egregores and archetypes lies the confrontation with the personal and collective shadow. In Jungian terms, the shadow encompasses all the aspects of oneself that have been repressed, denied, or deemed unacceptable by the conscious personality. It contains not only negative traits such as anger, greed, and envy, but also positive qualities that have been suppressed, such as assertiveness, creativity, and even divine ambition. The shadow is formed as a survival mechanism. Society demands conformity, and the child, seeking love and acceptance, hides away parts of themselves deemed undesirable by their environment. However, what is repressed does not disappear. It festers, operating from the unconscious, influencing behavior, dreams, relationships, and perceptions. On a societal level, collective shadows manifest as scapegoating, mass hysteria, witch hunts, and other forms of projected inner darkness. Those who refuse to confront their personal shadow inevitably fall prey to these collective eruptions. They see evil only outside themselves, never within, and thus remain enslaved by forces they neither see nor understand. On the left-hand path and within serious occult practice, engaging with the shadow is a non-negotiable requirement. To ascend, one must first descend. One must enter the underworld of the psyche, confront the monsters they have created, and reclaim the energy trapped within. This is a terrifying process. The shadow guards its secrets jealously, and the ego resists the confrontation, fearing the dissolution of its carefully constructed identity. Yet only through shadow work can the practitioner integrate the fragmented self, achieving true wholeness. Shadow work often begins with dream analysis, active imagination, and the identification of projection. When strong emotional reactions arise toward others, it often signals the presence of a disowned part of the self. Recognizing these projections and reintegrating the disowned qualities is an alchemical operation. Each reclaimed aspect becomes a source of energy, creativity, and wisdom that strengthens the self rather than weakening it. The danger in shadow work lies in becoming overwhelmed by the darkness. Without guidance, discipline, and a stable center, one can fall into depression, nihilism, or destructive behavior. It is not enough to see the shadow. One must also transform it. This is the essence of spiritual alchemy, to transmute the base material of the unconscious into the gold of enlightened consciousness. When the practitioner learns to navigate the terrain of egregores, archetypes, and the shadow, they gain immense freedom, no longer pulled unconsciously by the tides of collective thought, no longer ruled by hidden fears and desires. They become sovereign. They choose which currents to ride, which forces to invoke, and which battles to fight. They become adept not only in their magical practice, but in the art of living itself. However, this mastery demands continual vigilance. New shadows emerge as one grows. Egregores shift forms. Archetypes present deeper and more challenging aspects. The journey is endless, but each cycle brings greater strength, clarity, and power. The magician becomes a bridge between the visible and the invisible, a conscious participant in the ongoing creation of reality. Ultimately, the engagement with egregores, archetypes, and the shadow is about reclaiming the full spectrum of one's being. It is about remembering that light and darkness are not enemies, but partners in the dance of becoming. It is about stepping out of the roles assigned by family, society, and history, and becoming the author of one's own myth. Only by descending into the hidden layers of the self can one rise into the fullness of being, wielding not borrowed symbols, but living power born from the deepest wells of existence. The astral plane occupies a central role in occult philosophy and practice, existing as an intermediary realm between the material world and higher dimensions of consciousness. Unlike the purely symbolic constructs encountered in psychological models, the astral realm is often described by mystics, magicians, and esoteric philosophers as a real, albeit subtle, level of existence, populated by energies, forms, and intelligences not perceptible through ordinary sensory experience. It is in this liminal dimension that the unseen forces of the psyche, spirit, and collective consciousness take shape, moving and influencing the visible world in ways that are not always immediately apparent. Those who learn to work within the astral do not merely believe in the invisible, they learn to perceive and shape it. To understand the astral plane, one must first accept a worldview in which consciousness is layered. In this view, the physical world is not the totality of reality, but merely its densest layer. Above, below, or perhaps interwoven with it, are subtler dimensions: the etheric, the astral, the mental, the causal, and beyond. The astral plane is frequently positioned as the next level beyond the physical, vibrating at a higher frequency, yet overlapping with physical space. It is here that dreams unfold, visions manifest, and the energies of emotion, will, and imagination take tangible form. When occult texts speak of spirits, gods, or non-human intelligences, they often refer to entities experienced or contacted on the astral plane. The astral plane is not uniform. It contains strata, each reflecting different qualities of consciousness. The lower astral is dense, chaotic, and populated by the detritus of human emotion, fear, lust, anger, and residual thought forms created by individuals or collectives. It is here that many of the so-called demons or malevolent spirits reside, not as entities independent of human consciousness, but as manifestations of it. These forms feed on attention and emotion, particularly negative states, and often persist long after the original events or thoughts that birthed them. Without knowledge and proper psychic hygiene, individuals may find themselves unknowingly influenced or drained by these entities. Ascending from the lower astral, one encounters the middle and higher astral levels, where energies become more refined. In these realms dwell archetypal figures, gods and goddesses, ascended beings, and what are often interpreted as angelic or divine presences. These intelligences may be contacted through ritual, meditation, and dream work. However, their appearance and messages are always filtered through the consciousness of the practitioner, meaning that discernment is vital. Not all that shines is benevolent, and the astral is infamous for illusions that masquerade as truth. One of the great tests of the magician is learning to distinguish between inner projection and external contact, between insight and deception. In ritual magic, the astral plane is the theater in which symbolic action generates real results. When a magician performs a ceremonial rite, casting a circle, invoking a deity, or tracing sigils, they are not merely acting on the physical level. They are imprinting upon the astral substance, creating patterns of energy that ripple outward into the material plane. This process, known as astral imprinting, is why intent, clarity, and emotional coherence are essential in magical practice. The astral responds not to dogma, but to vibrational resonance. Sloppy intention breeds chaotic results. Focused will shapes precise manifestations. Lucid dreaming and astral projection are among the most direct methods of exploring the astral realms. Through disciplined techniques, practitioners learn to separate their consciousness from the physical body and traverse these non-physical spaces. Unlike dreams, which are largely symbolic and unconscious, astral travel involves full conscious awareness in a body of light or energy. This experience is not without danger. One may encounter parasitic entities, become entangled in deceptive visions, or lose the thread of intention and become trapped in endlessly shifting illusory landscapes. Protection, preparation, and the anchoring of consciousness and purpose are essential safeguards. The existence of the astral plane also sheds light on many unexplained phenomena. Ghosts, hauntings, and residual spiritual impressions are often astral in nature. Places where intense emotional or traumatic events occurred can become stained in the astral, replaying energies like a broken record. Sensitive individuals can perceive or be affected by these residuals, which is why some locations feel oppressive or haunted, even if no physical explanation exists. Egregores and thought forms dwell within the astral as well. These constructs, generated by focused human attention, take on semi-autonomous existence and can act as either helpers or hindrances. In magical systems, advanced practitioners may create servitors, astral constructs designed for specific tasks. These beings are programmed through ritual, visualization, and intent, then released into the astral to carry out their purpose. However, as with any autonomous form, servitors must be regularly maintained, deconstructed, or reintegrated. If ignored, they can become unstable, leaking energy or even turning against their creator in subtle psychological ways. The astral also serves as the crucible for deep spiritual transformation. In many esoteric traditions, initiation involves passage through the astral underworld, confronting the self, undergoing symbolic death, and emerging reborn. These are not metaphorical journeys, but real energetic transitions experienced in altered states of consciousness. The initiate is stripped of false identities, illusions, and attachments, encountering both personal and collective shadows. It is through these trials that the soul forges its strength and realigns with its higher trajectory. Time and space in the astral are not linear. One can access past events, future probabilities, and distant locations instantaneously. This makes the astral a powerful tool for divination, healing, and insight. However, the fluidity of form also means that perception in the astral is highly subjective. Everything encountered there must be interpreted symbolically and tested through inner discernment. Symbols encountered repeatedly across cultures, such as serpents, eyes, or labyrinths, often indicate transpersonal truths rather than personal projections. Magicians and mystics across ages have emphasized that mastery of the astral is essential before engaging with higher planes. It is the training ground of the soul, the mirror of one's inner world projected outward. To master the astral is to master the mind, emotions, and imagination, not by suppression, but by integration. The imagination is not a place of fiction, but a bridge to deeper reality. Every astral journey, every symbolic vision, is a conversation between the soul and the greater mystery of being. In the deeper layers of the occult iceberg, the astral is not merely a realm of spirits and visions. It is part of the control matrix. The idea that the physical world is manipulated by unseen powers finds its scaffolding in the astral, where many systems of belief, control, and illusion originate. Entities that thrive on worship, obedience, or fear often disguise themselves in familiar archetypal forms. The practitioner must learn to see through masks, to pierce glamour, and to stand sovereign. Only then does the magician graduate from servant to creator, from dreamer to architect. Ultimately, the astral plane is both a map and a mirror. It reflects the inner landscape of humanity and the hidden architecture of the cosmos. To work within it consciously is to step beyond the limitations of the material world and into a fluid living field where intention becomes form and spirit is shaped like clay. It is a realm of danger, yes, but also of immense possibility. Those who learn to navigate it with clarity, discipline, and courage are not just dreamers. They are builders of reality, architects of the invisible, and sovereign agents in a cosmos that hides more than it reveals. The illusion of reality and the concept of the Demiurge mark a critical turning point in the descent through the occult iceberg, shifting the seeker's focus from hidden energies and psychological forces to the very foundation of the cosmos itself. As the practitioner moves beyond the astral into the deeper levels of metaphysical inquiry, they encounter the radical proposition that the world they experience as real may in fact be a grand illusion, one orchestrated not by a benevolent creator, but by a blind architect, a false god, or a system of containment designed to keep consciousness fragmented, ignorant, and subservient. This is the realm of Gnostic cosmology, Hermetic revisionism, and postmodern occult frameworks that challenge not only religious dogma, but the very premise of consensual reality. The Demiurge, as encountered in these traditions, is not the ultimate source of creation, but a lesser being, often unaware of the greater divine reality above him. In classic Gnostic texts such as the Apocryphon of John or the Pistis Sophia, the Demiurge is referred to as Yaldabaoth, the lion-faced serpent who proclaims himself the only god, ignorant of the Pleroma, the realm of true divinity from which he is exiled. He is the creator of the material universe, but not its source. He is a craftsman, a builder of forms, but not a being of light. His rule is one of control, limitation, and deception. He constructs a world governed by rigid laws, cycles of suffering, and the illusion of separation, all designed to keep the divine spark within humanity asleep and unaware of its origin. In modern occultism, the Demiurge is not always seen as a literal entity, but as an archetypal principle, an organizing force of inertia, structure, and false authority. He represents the voice that says, "You cannot, you must obey. This is all there is." He is embedded in systems, in bureaucracy, in ideology, in consumerism, in technological overreach, in religious orthodoxy. The Demiurge is any force, internal or external, that convinces consciousness to remain small, afraid, divided, and dependent on external validation or salvation. The illusion of reality operates through layers. The senses are conditioned to perceive only a narrow band of frequency, edited by the brain to ensure survival within a programmed matrix. Language, culture, and belief further condition what we see, feel, and think, creating a feedback loop where reality becomes self-reinforcing. Even time and space, perceived as absolute, may in fact be constructs designed to sustain the illusion of linearity and limitation. Quantum theory, simulation theory, and advanced metaphysical models increasingly support what mystics have said for centuries, that reality is not as solid or objective as it appears. In this model, awakening is not merely about becoming a better person or aligning with spiritual laws. It is about breaking free from the demiurgic grid entirely. This requires more than knowledge. It demands gnosis, direct experiential awareness of one's true nature as a spark of divine consciousness, separate from the machinery of the false world. Such gnosis often comes through rupture, intense dreams, initiatory trauma, ecstatic insight, or deep meditative dissolution. When the illusion cracks, the self glimpses its vastness and its prison simultaneously. It is a terrifying and liberating moment, for one sees not only the bars of the cage, but also the keys hidden in plain sight. The Demiurge also manifests psychologically as the internalized superego, the voice of condemnation, guilt, and conformity that paralyzes action and demonizes desire. In this sense, liberation from the Demiurge is not only cosmological, but deeply personal. It involves confronting and deprogramming the inherited patterns of shame, fear, and obedience that keep the divine will dormant within. The true spiritual path thus becomes revolutionary, not in opposition to materiality itself, but in opposition to the lie that matter is all there is, or that spirit must be enslaved by flesh, by doctrine, by authority. Some traditions propose that the Demiurge created the world in imitation of the divine Pleroma, attempting to replicate its light without understanding its essence. This counterfeit creation is filled with beauty and horror, love and suffering, but always underlain by forgetfulness. The soul, incarnating into this realm, forgets its origin and becomes entangled in karma, desire, and identification with form. The work of the magician, mystic, or awakened seeker is to remember, to retrieve the fragmented pieces of the self scattered across lifetimes, to restore the connection to the source beyond the stars, and to reclaim the sovereignty of being. This is why many occult paths include stages of disillusionment, isolation, and ego death. These are not failures or punishments, but necessary phases of detachment from the matrix. One must see through the facade to begin shaping reality from the inside out, rather than being shaped by it from the outside in. The Demiurge thrives on unconsciousness, on routine, on repetition. He is the god of the mundane, the predictable, the mechanical. He rules over systems where individuality is suppressed and mystery is extinguished. He punishes deviation with guilt and rebellion with suffering. But he is not omnipotent. His power depends entirely on consent, on the willingness of souls to believe his reality is the only reality. Once this belief collapses, his grip weakens, and the soul begins to rise. The deeper implication of this understanding is that reality must be re-enchanted, reimagined, and reprogrammed from within. The magician, having seen the lie, does not abandon the world, but transforms it. They become a lucid dreamer inside the collective dream, planting symbols, creating new narratives, dissolving false idols. In this way, the work becomes mythic, echoing the ancient stories of Prometheus, Lucifer, and Sophia, all of whom defied the cosmic order to bring knowledge, light, or liberation to the imprisoned soul. To speak of the Demiurge is not to fall into paranoia or theological fatalism. It is to recognize the depth of the challenge before anyone seeking truth. It is to admit that awakening is not a safe or simple process, but a perilous journey through illusion, into shadow, beyond comfort, and toward the terrifying beauty of what lies beyond form. It is to walk a path that may cost everything familiar, but offers in return the only thing that truly matters: freedom, gnosis, and the power to create without chains. To know all of this is not an intellectual exercise, nor a means of entertainment for the spiritually curious. The reason to explore the layers of the occult iceberg, to understand egregores, archetypes, astral dynamics, and the illusion cast by the Demiurge, is rooted in the most ancient human impulse: to awaken. To awaken is not merely to gather esoteric knowledge or memorize systems of symbols, but to remember who and what we truly are beneath the masks of flesh, personality, ideology, and biological conditioning. It is the reclamation of divine sovereignty, a return to a state of consciousness unchained from illusion. The awakened individual is not someone who believes differently. They are someone who perceives differently. Their reality is no longer filtered by inherited narratives, religious programming, or materialist assumptions. They see the world as it is, an interface, a dynamic field of energy, mind, and intention, shaped by perception, belief, and will. In this sense, awakening is not the end of the path, but the beginning of true responsibility. With knowledge comes power, and with power comes the obligation to use it wisely, creatively, and consciously. The awakened path is not glamorous. It often begins in darkness, with disillusionment, isolation, and the painful tearing away of all false certainties. When one pierces the veil, there is no going back. Old comforts vanish. Old gods fall silent. The world becomes alien in its familiarity. What once seemed meaningful becomes hollow. This existential rupture is not a punishment. It is the birth canal of gnosis. It is the emptying that allows for authentic being to emerge. The practitioner learns that what they thought was identity was merely costume, that what they thought was truth was habit, and that what they called reality was consensus hallucination maintained by collective inertia and unseen forces. To walk this path is to become a stranger in the world, and yet more truly oneself than ever before. The awakening individual no longer seeks external approval or validation. They cease to live reactively and begin to live intentionally. Every thought becomes a seed, every word a spell, every action a declaration of sovereignty. This is not the path of escape or superiority. It is the path of responsibility. For now the awakened one understands that they are both creator and destroyer of their reality. They begin to design life not based on fear or tradition, but from the unshakable knowing of the self. And yet the deeper the awakening, the more one realizes that there is no final arrival, no ultimate attainment. The soul is not a project to be completed, but a flame to be continually kindled. The path of awakening requires the constant integration of paradox. One must learn to hold light and darkness, order and chaos, unity and individuality in a single awareness. The awakened mind does not flee from suffering, but examines it. It does not deny death, but walks alongside it. Through this courage, power is born, not domination over others, but mastery over the self. One becomes the alchemist of their own being, transmuting trauma into wisdom, confusion into clarity, limitation into vision. This is the real work, the inner great work that the mystics and magicians have whispered about for millennia. Importantly, to awaken is not to escape the world, but to engage it more fully. The awakened one sees reality as malleable and thus becomes a participant in its continual recreation. They may choose to remain hidden or to teach, to build or to dismantle, to create art or initiate movements, but always from the perspective of inner clarity and purpose. They no longer act from fear or compulsion. Their compass is no longer cultural expectation or religious law, but the inner flame of gnosis. The world is no longer something they live in, it becomes something they shape. But why does it matter? Why bother with all this when one could live a comfortable life within the illusion? The answer is simple and yet profound, because the soul remembers. Beneath the layers of conditioning and forgetfulness, something in us knows that this life, this world, is not all there is. Something calls us to deeper truth, not for the sake of abstraction, but for the sake of becoming whole. To ignore that call is to remain fractured. To follow it is to begin the return to the sacred source, not in some distant heaven, but in the innermost heart of the self. Awakening is the act of becoming fully alive, fully present, fully free. The cost of this freedom is high. One must give up cherished illusions, face the abyss without flinching, and learn to stand alone. But the reward is immeasurable. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from fear, freedom from false gods and their demands. The awakened one sees through the machinery of control and chooses to live as a sovereign soul in a world of dreamers. They become a light not because they seek to shine, but because they can no longer be hidden. And perhaps most importantly, awakening is contagious. One awakened soul sends ripples into the collective field. One clear vision cuts through the fog of collective hypnosis. The more individuals who reclaim their power, the more unstable the illusion becomes. This is why true esoteric knowledge has been suppressed. Not because it is dangerous to the soul, but because it is dangerous to systems of control. Awakening is revolution at the level of consciousness. It threatens the foundations of empire, not with violence, but with truth. So why know this? Because you are not what you were told. Because the world is not what it seems. Because hidden behind every moment of despair is the chance to remember who you are. The iceberg is not a warning, it is a map. Each layer, each concept, each forbidden truth is a doorway. Behind those doors is not darkness, but the light of a being who has remembered, reclaimed, and risen. The path of awakening is not for everyone, but for those who walk it. Nothing is ever the same again. And that is exactly the point. And so, after descending through each layer of the occult iceberg, the illusions stripped away and the hidden truths laid bare, we arrive not at an ending, but at the threshold of something far more immense. What lies beyond this point is not more information, but transformation. The journey you have taken is not one of passive consumption, but of active remembrance. A slow, deliberate reactivation of the ancient voice within that never stopped whispering, even when the world grew loud with lies. You have not learned something new. You have remembered something you have always known. That beneath the symbols, beneath the myths, beneath the layers of control and confusion, there exists a presence, silent, vast, eternal. And it is you. To walk away from this journey unchanged would be to retreat into the fog after glimpsing the edge of a mountain. You cannot unknow what you now know. The mirror has been turned, and whether you look away or deeper into it, you have already stepped into the current. And that current flows toward sovereignty. It flows toward responsibility. It flows toward creation. This is not a call to follow, but a call to forge. There is no savior on this path, no Messiah coming to absolve you. The light you seek must be lit with your own hands, from the friction of your own seeking, your own courage, your own refusal to submit to a world that demands sleep. The occult iceberg is not a theory. It is a map of how reality has been layered, filtered, and programmed, and how it can be decoded, restructured, and ultimately transcended. But no one can descend it for you. No book, no teacher, no ritual can substitute the confrontation with the self, the shadow, and the false gods that linger in your thoughts. This is your work. your fire, your burden, your gift. And if you carry it with reverence and resolve, you will become more than awakened. You will become sovereign. That is the true meaning of the occult path. Not power over others, but power over illusion. Not worship, but will. Not salvation, but transformation. To everyone who joined me in this descent, thank you. Thank you for your presence, your curiosity, your willingness to walk into depths most avoid. If you felt something stir within you, follow it. If something unsettled you, examine it. If something felt like truth, live it. This is not the end of a video. This is the echo of a beginning. Until next time, remain vigilant. Remain sovereign. And above all, remain awake. This is Occultum Veritas. Farewell.